Natasha and her story is one I think a lot of people will quietly relate to. She spent 10 years working as a teacher, long days, constant pressure, and always putting others first. Over time, that burnout caught up with her, her mental health declined, and a binge eating disorder she thought was behind her resurfaced. A turning point led her into weight training, then competitive bodybuilding, a journey that gave her strength but also came with realities we don't talk about enough. In this episode, Natasha shares what she learned, what it cost her, and how she's since redefined what health actually looks like. Welcome to the podcast.
Thank you, Karen. I'm really, really excited to be here today.
It's great to have you on. If we can just start from, I guess, your story with teaching and what difficulties you experienced.
Yeah, teaching was one of those careers that I always aspired to, but I don't think, even though I was always hardworking since I was a student, I didn't really believe, that it would be something that would really affect my life later on. And the fact of the matter is, it is a lovely thing working with young kids, teenagers. I don't think anyone really goes into teaching hating kids, despite, that stereotype that, young kids are horrible to work with, teenagers are horrible. The fact of the matter is they were the best part of the job. They really were. Like, you get some bad kids and you get some good kids, but on the whole, they're probably the best part of the job. And I think for me, I loved it when I first went into it. And I'll be honest and say that the first 4 to 5 years were probably the best years. But as soon as I worked my way up the ranks and I had more responsibility and I became in charge of a department of 9-10 members of staff under me, that's when I really saw teaching in a different light. It became something that, what I thought was once about the kids ended up becoming like, hitting numbers, hitting targets, the stress from parents, from people above me. And it got to the point where it really did take over my life in a really negative way. And I started going into work, dreading it at first, crying about it. And I very much in that 1 year where I became a head of English really, really spiraled. And yeah, what turned into like working 5 days a week ended up turning into 7. I'd go in teaching Saturday schools, the overload of like the marking and dealing with kids, as well as the extra responsibilities that I had overrunning a department. It just, it got the better of me, to say the least. And it got to the point where my stress was really, really heightened. My sleep was really bad. My eating was all over the place as well. And after working 12 to 13 hour days, I would just come home and just try and switch off. But then the only thing that I found comfort in was just food. But then I would go through cycles as well. So I'd go through cycles of eating a lot for like 2 or 3 days, and then I wouldn't eat anything for 2 or 3 days. And it became like a very gradual cycle that got the better of me. And it just got to the point where I would literally dread waking up in the morning.
Do you think that if you didn't have that burnout, you wouldn't have spiraled to, I guess, like the binge eating or like the eating disorder stuff?
That's an interesting question, because I feel like it was inevitable that that was going to happen at some point. But it took me to be at my most stressed, most mentally drained, really, really, really bad burnout for it to happen. And I think, and that's what they say a lot about people that have certain eating disorders like binge eating disorder. It kind of bites you back in the bum when you are at your most vulnerable state in life, hence why some people who've experienced like a recovery from alcoholism and drug addiction, often people that have relapses, from all the research that I've done, it's usually when you're at, your most vulnerable, your most stressed state, because that's when all those old rewiring systems in your brain have been fired up again. So I do think it was inevitable that was going to happen.
Yeah. Did you have any of those tendencies when you were in high school? I guess like that stuff is heightened when we're teenagers as well.
Yeah, no, definitely. So binge eating disorder was something that I remember my first instance of like secret eating when I was about 7 years old. I remember it very, very, very clearly. And I talk a lot about that in my book. And so from the age of 7 is the first time that I remember experiencing hiding food, eating in secret without my parents knowing. And I don't even know, I can't really remember when I was 7, like whether I was genuinely hungry at the time, but it was like it was a secret act that no one ever knew about. And then as I became a teenager, I did have a lot of body image issues. I wasn't a fat kid by any means, but I was someone that I did always think that I should be thinner. I did compare myself to other people when I was a teenager that I went to school with. I always wished I was smaller. So I'd go through phases when I was in my teenage years where I would try these crazy drastic diets. I remember that from the age of like maybe like 16, 17. It would always be before I had a holiday in the summer. I would say to myself, right, I'm going to really restrict for 4 weeks at a time. And every time I would drop like a stone in about 4 weeks, and I would try these crazy things every single year. So it became something that I did like once a year, really. But then again, it's crazy when you understand like what restriction can really do to a person. It puts you in this cycle of, I'm going to restrict for 4 weeks and then I'm going to pile everything back on again. And then it became an all or nothing thing when I was growing up. So I'd either be on a diet or off a diet from the age of like 17, 18, 19. Any fad diet that ever existed, I'd have been the one to try it because I did want to be smaller. I never thought I was massive, but I wanted to feel like I was doing something drastic for some reason. So that became something that appeared and reappeared very much a part of my life, especially in my early 20s. I would experience binging loads of food in one go and then not eating much for 1 or 2 days because I felt that it was something that kind of comforted me, and it was a form of pleasure, I suppose, because I didn't really have anything else in my life at the time.
Do you think at that point in your life there was anywhere where you sort of lacked control of something, but you felt like with this you could control it, or you had something that you could control?
Yeah, it's a funny one, that, because on the one hand, I felt like I was in control because I'd be like, right, I'm going to restrict for 4 weeks and I'd be able to do it all the time. But then would come after that when I decided, oh, I'm not on this anymore, then I would really lose control with food. So it's a difficult one to explain because on the one hand, you feel like you're in control because of restriction. And then after that, you face the consequences of, because of the restriction, I now feel completely out of control.
I've also heard, I don't know if you've seen any research with it, that OCD is somewhat linked to eating disorders. Have you heard that?
I have heard of that. Yeah, I have heard of that because it's a control thing, isn't it? A lot of people that do have eating disorders do have OCD. Yeah, I have heard of that. Because it is, again, it's fundamentally, it's about control or the illusion that you are in control when actually, when you have an eating disorder. Yeah, exactly.
And then how long were you in that cycle for when you were teaching? And then what made you decide, okay, like, I can't do this anymore?
Yeah, so it was something that always surfaced and resurfaced. It'd be a case of my whole entire teaching career, it would be like if they brought in food for all the teachers on a Friday, like all the croissants and all the pastries, I would literally binge on them while I was working like on my computer or in between breaks. And then there'd be times where I'd feel that, you know, I could try and eat normally. But at that time, I'll be honest, I didn't really think I had a problem. Weirdly, I just thought it was normal to overeat on all these pastries and cakes in one go and then not really do much the next few days, and then it would happen again. So I would say that the entire 10-year career, it was something that always there and wasn't there and would come and go. But I didn't realize it was a problem, I'll be honest, until like I came out of bodybuilding in 2019. That's when I realized it really was a problem. So the turning point that you're asking about was one which, when I was in this 1 year at this particular school, the one where I had quite high role in that job, that entire year, because I hated the job so much, I was binging after work a lot of the time, going home to a house on my own, binge eaters will often only ever do it in secret as well. They will rarely do it in front of other people, because that's linked with the guilt and the shame and the secrecy. And it got to the point where I hated the job. I was developing panic attacks going into the school. When I was really, really bad, when I parked up one morning, I had to get 2 members of staff to like calm me down, to get me out of the car, because I drove to work that particular day and I could not face, I couldn't face my life. I couldn't face doing a whole day. I remember the head teacher at one point had to get me out the car, and he was like, what's going on? So after that point, when I was really bad and facing other issues like sleep paralysis, I was experiencing that. My cycle as a female was all over the place. The cramps were really bad. And apparently from the research, that can be linked with severe chronic stress as well. That chronic stress in that entire year caused me to take sporadic days off work. So I'd take sporadic days off there and there. And what's interesting is kind of like my behaviors when I was off work. If I took 2 days off work, they never made me feel rested. They never made me feel better. I actually got worse in the cycle. So I would maybe not eat very much. I wouldn't even get a shower that day. I would stay in my pajamas all day. There was no motivation to do anything, even on those 2 days where I was off. I wouldn't even leave the house. I was in the most horrible, depressed state. And I never really understood depression, or when people described experiences of depression until then. And for me, my depression meant that you have no motivation to do anything. You don't even have motivation to see people. You become flaky. You take a step back from people. You're kind of just wallowing in your life, but you want to get out of it, but you don't know how. So the final turning point was one of those days where I was off work and my brother came in. He let himself in because me and my brother are very close with his key, and he just gave me some brutal honesty that day. He sat at the end of my bed because I didn't even open the door to him. I just couldn't engage. And he was like, you can't carry on like this. And it was his words telling me that you cannot continue your life like this. You're basically in the pits. Like there is no way out of this unless you change something. It was only until I heard those words that there was a turning point in my head. And he said to me, you know what? You need to start training with me. He's a personal trainer as well. And he was like, it will get you out the house. So his thing was, it's going to get you out of the house when you have a really bad day at work. It will mean that you're out of the house. You're engaging with me. You're engaging with people. You're doing something fun. You're doing something good, like an activity. I had no idea what the gym would do. And my immediate reaction was, what's that going to do? How's weight training going to help me? And he didn't say anything. And it was a weird moment because he, said he would train me. And that stayed in my head for a few months. I never acted on it straight away. I really, really thought about it a few months. And I think it was about 3 months later, I said, what you said, maybe I do need something to get me out the house, to make me forget for 1 hour how much I hate my life. I hate my job. There's nothing positive in my life. And it's crazy because that was the start of everything. That one day where I said yes, went into the gym, a complete beginner, no idea what I was doing, but he was there to help me and talk me through what things were. I'd never held a dumbbell in my life. And that moment, that day changed everything forever. Actually set a new pathway in my life. And if it wasn't for that day, I wouldn't even be speaking to you right now. It's mad thinking about it in that way.
Yeah. I guess sometimes it does take that external person to break the cycle. And so fortunate you had someone that was, I don't know if he was persistent with you about it, but it's also crazy in the way that I feel like our bodies let us put up with stress to a certain point, and then they start giving us signs to the point where they literally force us to stop. You'll start getting, you said, panic attacks, and you can't sleep, and you could, if you kept going, you could have got health conditions, and your body sort of just shuts you down.
Yeah, and that's that's something that I never realized. And back then I didn't even realize. I was like, why is this happening to me? Why do I have sleep paralysis? They wanted to send me to a sleep specialist. I was like, why am I getting like severe cramps, dysmenorrhea? That's what they call it. And when your cramps are really linked with stress. And I just thought, at then I didn't realize it was chronic stress, but when I really reflect, and obviously when I wrote the book about this whole time period of my life, all of those, like you said, your body will give you signs that you are undergoing severe chronic stress. And back then I had no idea that's what was happening. And that's something that I think people need to really be aware of, that not many people are that in tune to their body. I wasn't then. I am now, because especially because I do work in the health and the fitness industry, it's something you learn to do. Most people will not ever really pay attention to those signs that you mentioned. And I think that's something that people need to really work on, that you need to trust yourself. You need to trust your body, because your body is telling you things and you're ignoring them. And I was ignoring them. All that whole year of chronic stress, I was ignoring those signs, trying to continue. So yeah, you're right. It's crazy what your body can say to you, tell you.
Yeah.
So it took me another 2 years to leave teaching after that. So what I did do was this. So when I did start, I know, mad, right? When I did start training with my brother, what started off as twice a week became something that I started to love, even though I was a complete beginner. Even though at the beginning, like the first few weeks, I would say I felt very uncomfortable being in a gym environment, probably because I was very unconfident as well. I had very low self-esteem. And I started to love it. And I started to realize that the hour that I was in the gym, I became a happier person, even in just an hour. My evenings started to be a bit better and feel better when I got home. I felt like by doing something as intense as weight training, believe it or not, as intense as it is in that hour, was calming me in the evening. I started to sleep better. Because I was training, I started to learn how to eat better. And that's when I started to recover, really. Like, I eventually, because I was eating better and sleeping better, and my hunger levels were better, because obviously, again, your stress, your cortisol can make your hunger signals completely out of sync. Because they were all starting to balance out, everything started to fall into place. And I started saying to myself that, I started telling my brother, like, the only time I ever feel really happy is in the gym. And he was like, you need to just keep training 4 days a week. I was literally training 4 nights a week. It was amazing. And it got to the point where I eventually, so I started training 2016, 2017. I left that horrible school that I worked at within that year. I literally had stayed there a year, because I realized that stress that I'd experienced was not worth affecting my health. And that's when I realized that, wow, weight training is improving my health. This job is making it worse. I'm leaving it. So I decided to exit that situation. I eventually found another job, and I was still teaching, I would say another 2-3 years after that. So 2016 started weight training. I didn't leave teaching till 2019. So I worked at different schools after that. But it got to the point where, because everyone was seeing me from this little beginner in the gym who was, very weak, never picked up a dumbbell in my life, people started to ask me in those years of weight training, oh, are you training to compete in something? Are you training in bodybuilding? And I was like, no. Like, people started to assume that that's what I was training for. And then it got to the point where so many people were asking me, oh, are you training to compete in bodybuilding? And I was like, no. The seed was then planted in my head. And then I built up the courage to say to my brother, I want to compete. And then that's how I then started training to compete. And I didn't leave teaching until I was 8 weeks out from my first show. So I was still teaching and bodybuilding before my first. So that was hard.
Yeah. Do you think it was hard because you'd spent so many years on a career that you thought was lifelong, and then you get to a point where you're like, well, this is what I wanted to do, and now I don't want to, but then it's like conflicting to like your identity, and it's a bit like risky, or I guess nerve-wracking going into something else?
Yes, you've hit the nail on the head right there, Karen, because it was one of these things where my whole identity was tied into my teaching career. I felt like it was the only thing I was destined to do. I felt like it was the only thing I was born to do. The fact that my mum still to this day is still an English teacher as well, like she's in her 60s, still teaching. I felt like it was the only journey. And when you're young, and that's something I've learned as I've got older now that I'm past my mid-30s. It's kind of like when you're young, you feel like you're only destined to do one thing. And I felt that that's it. Yeah. That's the only career. That's my only thing. And then when I found this love of weight training and realizing that I actually could be good at this, like I could train other people, I could compete in bodybuilding, and who knows what opportunities will come out of that. And many did. Like, I started realizing that my identity was not tied into teaching anymore.
I feel like you also get to the point where you can recognize that the kids deserve better. Like they deserve someone who's passionate in the role and actually their best self when they're there.
Completely agree. And when I was first a teacher, I became qualified as a teacher when I was just 20 years old. So my first role in a school, I'd only just turned like 21. And as a young teacher back then, who's very impressionable, like I remember looking at old teachers who hated their jobs. And I always said to myself, oh, if I'm still like, when I'm this age teaching, I'm not going to be like that. Like you'd often find that the older teachers were always complaining, always negative. And you'd often find that the young teachers who are new to it, like, oh, they still have the passion and the love. And I always said to myself, oh, I don't want to be like that person. And it's mad that it's inevitable that, as you said, it's unfair for the kids. Like kids deserve to be taught by people that have passion, that have energy, that want to do it for them. And like I said, I became like, almost like within that 1 year where I hated my job, like I became like those older teachers that hated their life, that just did it for the money. And although it was very much a risk to leave a 10-year career behind and a solid income every single month, I still took that risk. And it's one of those things that I do not regret. I do not regret it at all. No way.
Yeah, for sure. And lucky for you, you were able to identify that and leave. I'm sure there's some people out there that still haven't got to that stage, if ever.
Yeah, I know. And I feel sorry for them. And I'll say to those people that, I'll say this, life is too short. Life is too short to do things that you hate, that you don't want to do. And I always found that I knew I made the right decision because I'm not an impulsive person. Like even when I decided I wanted to do bodybuilding, that still took another 2 years of weight training. So it was a very slow process. And I think that something is a good decision when you think about it for long enough in your head. And I thought about leaving teaching for a good enough time period in my head to know that my gut instinct is it's the right decision. And I think a lot of people are afraid of trusting that gut instinct. And that's where that fear comes in. And they're like, oh no, they're like, I can't do it. And I think it's just, no, go for it. Take the risk. People should take more risks.
I feel like humans have a fear of the unknown. And they very much get comfortable in doing things that they know. So if you're still thinking about it and it's like nagging on your mind, like that's your internal mind telling you like you have to make a change, otherwise you're going to be miserable.
Exactly. And it doesn't even just go for careers, Karen. It goes for like even people in relationships. Like if you're unhappy for a significant amount of time and you're trying your best to work on it and nothing is still changing, again, some action needs to follow. And a lot of people, whether it's a relationship, whether it's a career, whether it's, starting a business, whatever it is, people have let fear like hold them back. And I guess for something like bodybuilding, where all you have is fear, because you have fear of, can I do this? Can I get down to a lean physique? Can I commit to years? And it does take years to become a competitive bodybuilder. It's not something that you can do in 12 weeks. I had to do like a 2-year building phase, like a 2-year muscle building phase. Then on top of that, I had to do 6 months of dieting. And even prior to that was years of experience of like learning how to weight train properly. So it's one of those things that it takes time to build something. And, having all this fear and fearing, oh my God, am I going to succeed? Am I not? It's like it taught me to be brave. I would say that the sport of bodybuilding definitely taught me to be a better person, because it teaches you resilience. It teaches you to be comfortable with fear, with thinking, oh, I might not be able to do this. You know, I didn't know I was going to be able to do it.
And you've just got to get used to it. Like, I bet now that you've done it once, it's like, if you had to change again, you'd be like, oh, easy. Like, it's like a muscle. Like, if you get the reps in and you do it more and more often, then it's going to become just like natural to you.
Yeah, exactly that. And that's what happened. Like, the years that I invested into competitive bodybuilding, you know, I did one show, then I did another show. And then it was like, it just opened more avenues to, you know, I became comfortable with it. And therefore I became almost addicted to being in other uncomfortable situations. And in fact, I would say that it taught me to learn how to handle uncomfortable situations. Like, it taught me to be able to have the courage to speak to people if I thought that they'd upset me. I became more open and honest with people, because it really instills in you a different type of confidence. And that goes beyond physique. That goes completely beyond like the bodybuilding physique. Like,
so then tell us about bodybuilding. Like, for listeners who don't know the inside world of bodybuilding, what would you want them to know?
So if I could sum up bodybuilding, I would say it is an extreme sport. I would say that it takes a certain type of person to be able to do bodybuilding, definitely. Maybe crazy, maybe a crazy kind of person, but fundamentally it's being able to put yourself first. I will be honest and say, as much as it is like such an achievement for a lot of people, it's a very selfish sport. It's a sport that you have to have tunnel vision for. It's not something you can do half-heartedly, otherwise you'll never succeed in it. And basically, it's about being able to commit to training at least 4 days a week, fully doing, you know, weight training properly, with proper split, with a proper guidance from like a coach initially, if you're not sure what it is. And when you undergo that weight training, everything else you do outside of the gym is just as important. Your food has to be tracked meticulously. You have to have the right amount of calories. It is a form of restriction, I'll be honest. Maybe not so much in the muscle building phase. Yeah. So obviously before you go on to stage, you have to invest in a proper muscle building phase, which means you still have to track your food, but you have to grow muscle. So what you're doing is you're doing the opposite of a diet. You're slowly increasing your calories so that you're able to build muscle, because you cannot step on stage if you don't have any muscle mass, basically. So this is like the growth stage. So you do have more flexibility with food, but then you don't, because you can't overload on like carbs. You can't overload on this. You have to have the right amount, but you're never hungry in this stage. And then when you've undergone enough muscle and you've had a period of time where you've really grown muscle, the diet and what's called the cut is probably the hardest part of it. So you're still having to weight train 4 or 5 times a week. You're still having to track your food, except you are undergoing a level of restriction. So just to sum it up for people, in my experience, my dieting calories started at very high, started at like maybe 2,200 calories. Over 6 months, they dropped down in the last week or so, to 1,100 calories. So you are gradually over 6 months eating less and less. And all the while, your output is getting higher. So you're still training 4 or 5 days a week. And then on top of that, you're having to do like power walks, because you're having to burn these calories from somewhere so that you can get to your leanest state. So that took its toll, like mentally, physically. You are drained by the end. The first 3 months of the diet are easy. After that, you get more tired. You get more hungry. You become short-tempered with people because you're hungry. Your sleep, although you're prioritizing it, you wake up ridiculously early in the morning because your cortisol is just so high and you have most energy in the morning. But really, and often a lot of bodybuilders said this, you become, so anyone who's had like anorexia, you become like an anorexic person towards the end. So you're repressing that hunger, and you look totally different in clothes as you would on stage. Because obviously when you're on stage, you've pumped up, you've had carbs, you're tanned up as well. So you see all the muscle definition, but you know, you become incredibly tired, very fatigued, like you would equivalent to like an old person or an anorexic person who has no energy.
And what sort of consequences afterwards that we haven't discussed are there?
Okay, so afterwards, you're on a high for about 2 or 3 weeks because you've competed, you've won medals, you've won trophies. It does open a lot of opportunities. I ended up working after that, obviously like a year or so later, I ended up working with one of the biggest protein brands. I'm sure I can mention Grenade, one of the biggest protein bar brands. Ended up working with them. So it opens up a lot of doors afterwards to like different people in like the fitness industry. People want you to do photo shoots, that sort of thing. So you're on a high initially. And then a few weeks after that high kind of comes down because I developed the eating disorder again. So the binge eating disorder, which I'd recovered from after teaching and finding weight training, weirdly came back, but at its greatest peak. It was the worst ever. So obviously you're trying to fight this eating disorder. So scientifically what's gone in the body is that when anyone gets to their leanest state, like I was like single figures body fat percentage, which is very abnormal. I'd lost my period for 9 months. So all of my hormones were not working correctly. And that includes your hunger hormones. So what happens is when you get to such a lean state, your hunger signals, your leptin and your ghrelin hormones become out of sync. So I would eat an 800 calorie meal and I still wasn't full. So I couldn't process in my body when I was full. So I would literally eat 800 calories in one go, massive meal, healthy meal, and I'd still be starving. It's like I'd never eaten it. So because of hormonally, this is what's going on. At the time when I was fighting this eating disorder, I blamed myself. You often think that it's a lack of motivation, it's a lack of discipline. But then I'd say to myself, I've been disciplined for years, like leading up to this point. So how can all of a sudden that just be thrown out the window, like overnight? So back then I genuinely thought it was me. And then you're fighting with not just the eating disorder, you're fighting with the fact that you no longer look like this bodybuilder. I no longer look like I train.
Yeah.
I'm still training all the while, but I don't look like one anymore. I'm suffering with body dysmorphia as well. I'm suffering with the eating disorder, the body dysmorphia. I had a lot of like imposter syndrome as well. So obviously at this point I was a qualified personal trainer. I'm training people to have amazing body transformations and I can't even control myself. I can't even track my own food.
Yeah.
I was battling with a lot. It really, really takes its toll on another level, but it was a different kind of recovery from when I was like leaving teaching. It's harder than doing the bodybuilding itself. Coming out of it is harder than being in it. That's the honest truth.
Yeah. I guess it goes to show like how long these mental conditions can take to overcome.
Definitely. It's like there are consequences. Every time anyone looks on Instagram and sees a bodybuilder and craves to want to have their physique, just know this. Mentally, they're going through utter turmoil after they've come off stage.
Yeah.
You will always, and most people will always have an eating disorder as well. Even people that have never had a history of binge eating disorder or eating disorders, every single bodybuilder that I've spoken to has had some level of mental health problem or eating disorder, even if it's just temporary after. Obviously, mine was longer because it was something that was ingrained in me my whole life. Like I had it my whole life. But most people will have it at least temporarily, at least like a few months.
Yeah, and no one knows about that either, like external people. What were the key things that helped you get out of the binge eating disorder after bodybuilding? I guess you said identifying the problem first.
Yes. And I think that goes for any problem that anyone has, whether it's alcoholism, drug addiction, food addiction, whatever it is. Whatever type of eating disorder is accepting you have a problem. So as soon as I accepted I had a problem, I realized that in order for me to overcome it, the first thing I needed to do was not eliminate the binges, because they were really bad. Karen, I was binging 7 out of 7 days, sometimes twice a day. Sometimes it'd be the afternoon. It would always be in the evening. I said to myself, I need to try and not eliminate, because I started by minimizing the binges. So I started recording when I was binging, because that was the only way I could see, like, you know, what was going on that day. Oh, okay, I binged there. So I had a little calendar in my phone, and I'd put an X every time I binged. Sometimes there'd be 2 X's, sometimes there'd be just 1, but it would be like 7 days. And then I said to myself, so I started researching, like, what is this disorder? How have people done it? I started listening to podcasts. I became obsessed with researching about how people have recovered, because everyone's experience is very different as well. So everything that I learned through other people, the most important thing was no restriction. So I couldn't diet because my hunger signals were so out of sync. I had to learn how to listen to them again. That was so hard. Like, I would eat, like I said, an 800 calorie meal. So I would fundamentally try and prioritize good, healthy meals. But if I was still hungry, I would eat. And then slowly, from learning to listen to my hunger again, it just was such a battle in itself, like banging your head against a brick wall. When I got down from 7 binges a week, so 7 binge days, to like 5 or 6, that was like a real turning point, because that was like me realizing, oh my God, I can do it. I can go through a whole day without binging. And I realized that when I minimized my stress levels and I wasn't becoming obsessed with, oh my God, I'm going to binge. When your stress is heightened, most people relapse into a binge and give into a binge when they're really stressed. So I tried to like elevate my stress. I started to prioritize getting my period back. So my cycle was gone for about 9 months, ironically. 9 months.
I was going to ask that.
And so I started tracking. Yeah. And the other thing that I learned was prioritizing getting my period back. So the following, I guess my priorities changed. Post bodybuilding, it was not what I looked like. It was about getting my period back, and it was about minimizing binges. And I was researching in how to get your period back through people that had suffered with hypothalamic amenorrhea, which is what I was diagnosed with for those 9 months. And a lot of women were saying, you have to like increase your fats. You have to learn to listen to your hunger signals, make sure you're eating enough of certain foods. So I started doing those things. And then slowly my binges went down from like 7 to 5, which was the biggest achievement ever. And then I realized that, okay, so I can do it. There are days where I can go through without a binge. And then they slowly went down from like 5 to 4. And because what was happening, my hunger signals were slowly going back into sync again. So I was only eating when I was genuinely hungry. And the most important tactic that I tried was the delayed tactic. And this was something that a lot of people had tried as well. So when you have that binge urge, which is so strong, where you just want to give in and just eat everything, I'd set a 20-minute timer on my phone. And the whole point is you're meant to, in order to try and prevent a binge, you're meant to delay it first, because that helps you into like slowly being able to have control again. So I'd set a 20-minute timer on my phone. I would distract myself. Sometimes I'd have to physically take myself out of the house, away from the kitchen, so that I wouldn't binge. Weirdly, sometimes the 20-minute delay and distracting myself through walking, listening to a podcast, getting away from a food situation would often repress the urge, and it would disappear. And then I'd be like, oh, the urge is gone. Other times I had to give in. And more often than not, when the urge was still strong after that 20-minute delay, I would eat, but I would try and prioritize good food first. So I'd eat a whole meal. And then eventually my period came back. That was a big turning point in my hormones was slowly going back to normal. That was a massive, massive turning point. And then gradually over about a year or two, those binges went down to like 4, 3, 2, 1. And then there was a time where a lot of time went by and I was like, I haven't binged. What's happened? And then you go through another issue because you're worried you're going to get into a relapse. So you fought this for so long, and then you're like, right, okay, but I still don't feel comfortable because I'm like, it's going to happen, it's going to happen. And then you have this fear for so long that it's going to happen again. Luckily, I didn't go without one for a very long time. The last binge relapse I had was in 2022 when I had a really tough time. Like I ended a 5.5 year relationship. That was a whole other crazy thing, but touch wood, I've never had one since. And I'm at the point in my life now, Karen, where I trust myself. I trust my body. I trust my hunger signals so much that I'm not afraid that I will have a binge relapse.
So great to hear that you, I guess, overcame it in the end. Do you think it like it ever ends, or is it always in the back of your mind somewhat?
It's interesting that you asked that question because one of my clients asked me this question a few months ago, and she said to me, Tash, do you ever really get over your binge eating disorder? And I answered in two parts. I said, right, firstly, yes, because I've not had a binge since 2022. Okay. So we're now heading into like the 40s, 2026 now. And I said, yes, you do. But one thing I will say is that you always are conscious of being in tune with your body. One thing you have to do is practice eating in trigger situations. It's not like alcoholism where you can avoid going to a bar, because with food, you cannot avoid food. You can't just restrain from eating food, which is why it's a bit different from like alcoholism or drug addiction where you can come off that substance completely. So with food addiction, binge eating disorder, I underwent during my recovery having to practice. So it's something that's always in your head, but it is something that you can be fully recovered from, in answer to your question.
And also, like you said, like you have that tangible thing, which is the hunger signals. So if your brain is trying to trick you into thinking like you should eat more or eat less, you can then look at, okay, well, what are my hunger like signals saying? Because they're, once you've retrained them, are not going to lie. So you can bet on that's going to be like the accurate way to go.
Exactly. And that's the one thing. And when people are like, oh, when they've asked me the question, oh, so what's your eating like now? And when I say I'll eat when I'm hungry, again, I used to have so many rules in my head when I was binge eating that my breakfast had to be at 8 a.m. My lunch had to be at 1. Now, when people are like, what's your schedule like now? It's like, when I say I only eat when I'm hungry, sometimes I'll eat breakfast at like 11 a.m. The other day I was so hungry because I started my working day earlier. I wanted breakfast at 8 a.m. or sometimes my first meal might be at 12.
So you transitioned to powerlifting and being a PT, is that correct?
Yes. So I became a personal trainer in 2019, 8 weeks before my first show when I was a bodybuilder. So I've done that ever since 2019. I have my own clients. And then I decided that after I left bodybuilding and did the whole recovery with the binge eating, I was like, I don't want to compete in bodybuilding again. I want to try something else. And I've gone into competitive powerlifting, which is amazing. So very unlike bodybuilding, it's not an aesthetic sport, but it is a performance-based sport, which is amazing.
Are you happy and fulfilled in PT at the moment? Or do you get like ideas for like career pivots?
It's so where I am at the moment, I love PT. I love my clients. I get so much satisfaction that it really doesn't feel like a job. Like sometimes when I go and train my clients, I'm like, oh my God, should I even be paid for doing this? Because it's so enjoyable. It's almost like it shouldn't be a job. So I love PT. I feel like I'll probably be doing it maybe for the next 10 years. But going past that, I always knew that I wanted to be an author, and I'll just show the audience, if anyone's watching, my book here. Yeah. So this took 4 years and 4 months to create. And I always knew because again, I was an English teacher. It's a very long process. And I always knew because I love English, because I've always had that embedded in me. I always knew I wanted to write. I never knew what I wanted to write a book on. It just so happened that I came up with the idea of Beyond the Barbell. But it is a book that goes beyond fitness. So the book Beyond the Barbell is not just for people that are into weight training. In fact, my agent, who was the first person to read it, said that she's not into fitness by any means. And she said that it was so special because it goes beyond fitness.
And then you have your podcast as well. Is that similar themes and topics?
Yeah, so I started hosting the Binges to Barbells podcast, which is on Spotify, in January of last year. So it's been a year now.
Okay.
I've done 53,
Yeah.
52, 53 episodes. And yeah, so
Congrats.
that platform I've got, thank you. It's like, as well, Karen, it's a lot of work, isn't it? Like you're having to like be strict with your
Tell me
time.
about
This is
it.
when I'm going to podcast. This is when I'm going to script. It's a lot of work, but I do love it. And that platform is to help people with binge eating disorder. But I've also had like a variety of guests on there.
Awesome. Well, we'll get to the two reoccurring questions that I ask every guest. So the first one, if you could go back and give yourself one sentence of advice at your lowest point, what would it be?
If I could give that advice to myself when I was literally in bed at home, when I didn't go into work, I would tell myself, Tash, one day this is going to be a valuable life lesson and it's going to lead you to better places. And that's what I would tell myself, to remember that anyone who's had a low point in their life, it doesn't stay like that forever. Like there's no way that my health would have been able to do that. So that's what I would definitely tell my younger self back then.
Yeah, I like that. It's just a chapter in your book, I guess.
Yes. Yeah. A big chapter.
A heavy chapter. So second question, looking back on your journey now, is there anything you can smile or laugh about?
I want to smile that I managed to actually like feel like genuinely happy in life. Like when I think about the roller coaster of emotions, like at the start of my journey compared to now, my smile is the fact that I managed to get out the other side. Like even when I feel certain signs of stress in my life now, like if I have one night's sleep because I've just felt a little bit like stressed that day, I'm so aware that I am nothing. I'm not the person I was. So I'm smiling at the new person I've become. Definitely. The last thing about one is kind of how ridiculous I looked prancing around on stage in like those high heels, trying not to fall over and trip up. Oh my gosh. It's the only thing you worry about when you're literally like on these ridiculous heels like that big, like, oh gosh, I'm just laughing that, okay.
So high.
I look ridiculous in some way.
It's so weird. Like a bikini with shoes on in any form is just strange.
And honestly, Karen, when I look at videos of me prancing on stage, I'm like, oh my God, I actually cringe at it now. I'm not going to lie. Like, because it's such like a diva-ish thing. And everyone who knows me, I'm not a diva at all. But when you're on stage in a bikini in those heels, you have to pretend that you are like, you're taking on a completely different persona. So when I look videos of it now, I'm like, oh, I don't actually want to look at videos because I'm like, oh, it's hard to watch.
It's like, it's weird. Like you never feel more naked than when you're literally standing with no clothes on, but you still have your shoes on and you look down. I don't know what it is, but that just makes me feel more naked than like being fully naked.
So true. It's so true. Oh dear.
Yeah. Well, it's been such a great chat. Thanks so much for joining.
Karen, it's been really good. It's been a lot of fun and yeah, it's been great to be on your show. Thank you so much for allowing me to be on the Tumble Upward podcast. I'm really, really happy that I came on today.
Hi everyone, I just wanted to say if you or anyone you know has a story to share, please reach out so that I can keep bringing you stories from our community. Let's get as many voices heard as possible. And if you enjoyed this episode, please remember to like, subscribe, review, and follow. Thanks everyone!